tanked, taking the Canadian dollar with it. Exports aren't where they should be. The housing market is nervous, but at least our banks are okay. Or are they? Mathieu Bédard is an economist with the Montreal Economic Institute, which is an independent, not-for-profit research group. And welcome.
Hey.
You know, it caught my eye because, you know, in the last few months, so CIBC's cut 200 jobs, RBC 500 jobs, TD 800 jobs. They're closing branches, scaling back. This is not to say that the Canadian banks are in any kind of danger, but it's a real changing time for them, isn't it?
Well, the situation is making a lot of people nervous because when resource prices drop and when the housing market is sort of overeating, it means that maybe there are some defaults coming ahead and some losses. So they're trying to prepare for this situation. So
because most of the earnings are propped by energy and real estate, right? And that's not going to come back anytime soon.
It's not going to come back anytime soon, and on the housing front, they're facing new regulation. We're going to need to see whether those are good, good policies or not.
Yeah, and there's concern that the bubble might burst too in certain markets.
Definitely. So the good news is that they're acting ahead of it. They're seeing it coming. So they're having time to prepare actually for those things. So this is the good news. But 2016 is definitely going to be a challenge year for the banking system.
Because, you know, they're using the example of what Uber has done to the taxi industry. You've got players like Apple and Google, and they're starting to offer financial services that the banks currently provide, and at much lower rates, right?
Well, it remains to be seen whether 2016 is going to be the big break for what they call the financial tech. And we have to keep in mind that our banks are also preparing some apps that would compete with those products. So this might be some new competition for banks, but it remains to be seen whether 2016 is really the big break for all this fintech.
Though it would be very good for consumers, though.
It would be very good for consumers. It means lower prices for banking products, lower price for banking services. It's definitely a good news. Innovation in general is always a very good news.
The Trudeau cabinet was meeting for the past 3 days, talking about what they're going to do with the budget because of the lower oil prices and the Canadian dollar. And there seems to be a debate for economists. Is this a good time for them to be increasing spending and taking on debt, or should they change that focus?
So it depends where you stand with regards to Canadian stimulus theory. If you're of the old school and believes of some old theories that have not really worked in the past, then you're definitely in favor of spending on infrastructure. If you've been looking closely at what's been going on around the world and in Europe, stimulus actually happens when you cut a little bit back on your spending, because then you're leaving some money for the private sector to invest and for entrepreneurs to create jobs. So I would say it's a bad timing to
so you don't, because, you know, I think the concern is with infrastructure spending, it's the government that is creating jobs, and that might not be sustainable if they continue that route. It's not promoting the private sector, right?
It's taking resources away from projects that would otherwise have gone through, and putting them into special projects that are selected by the government rather than by entrepreneurs, by the market, by consumers themselves indirectly.
But you know, with the Canadian dollar, it's always felt that the manufacturing should be picking up. Do you see it picking up?
Well, it takes some time to get this machine going, but that's the good news. You know, when the loonie falls, there are all of those I should say almost natural processes to sort of to make the economy good in some other sectors. So when the oil and the resource industry is not so good, elsewhere in manufacturing and retail, things start picking up.
Here's hoping that's good for Quebec.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks to you.
And if you want more information on a lot of the stuff that the Economic Institute is doing, you can go to their website, which is really interesting, IEDM.org, the Montreal Economic Institute. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks to you.